It started as another fragment in a tray of broken clay. Lower third intact, upper section missing, edges worn smooth by 4,000 years of dust. The catalog tag called it part of the Eridu Genesis, the oldest known flood account in the world. Nothing about that should have mattered to anyone outside a university archive. Then a researcher reread the line where the god Enki speaks to a reed wall, knowing a man is listening on the other side, and the question that followed was simple, and it would not let go. Why would a myth need a wall at all? The official story is calm. Enlil, the storm god, is furious. Humanity has grown too loud, too numerous, and he wants them gone. Enki, the god of wisdom, is sympathetic. The gods have sworn an oath not to interfere. So, Enki finds a workaround. He does not warn the man directly. He speaks to a wall and lets the man overhear him on the other side. To mainstream scholars, this is a literary device, a clever way to let a god keep his oath in letter while breaking it in spirit. Symbolic, tidy, safe. But the tablet does not behave like a tidy text. It behaves like something written under constraint. Here is the strange part. The wall is specified, not described in passing, but framed with a kind of deliberate precision, as though the detail mattered beyond the story. A reed wall in a reed house at a particular location near the temple complex at Eridu. If this was only myth, the wall would not need to exist at all. The god could appear in a dream, the way later versions of the story actually do it. Instead, this version insists on a barrier, a method, a way for information to cross from one side to the other without the source being named. That is not how poetry usually works. That is how someone smuggles a message. The fragment itself is in rough shape. The fracture line is old, the surface pitted, the upper portion long gone, broken away sometime before it was excavated, or possibly long before that. Only the lower third survives. We know the ending. We know the wall. We do not know what came before it, and that gap has bothered more than one translator over the last century. The Eridu Genesis is not a single object. It survives as three separate fragments recovered from three different places. One came from Nippur, dug up by a University of Pennsylvania expedition in 1893. One came from Ur. A third, bilingual, written in both Sumerian and Akkadian, was found among the ruins of the library of Ashurbanipal, the great archive the Assyrians built centuries later to preserve what they considered essential. And in 2018, a new fragment surfaced, adding lines no one had read before. That detail alone should make you pause. This story has been quietly growing for over 100 years. Pieces keep showing up, and every new piece changes what the old pieces meant. The official explanation calls this expected. Ancient texts are often known for multiple copies. Scribes recopied important stories across centuries, and damage is simply what happens to clay over 4,000 years. Mainstream scholars have a simpler explanation, and in most cases they are probably right. Texts get damaged. Copies diverge. That is ordinary transmission. But this text did not diverge randomly. It diverged around one specific detail, and that is where things stop feeling symbolic. A few centuries after the cuneiform versions, a Babylonian priest named Berossos wrote his own account of the flood for a Greek audience that had never seen a clay tablet in its life. His version mostly matches the older sources: the flood, the boat, the survivor. But Berossos adds something the earlier cuneiform texts do not contain. Before the flood comes, the god instructs the man to bury all written records at the city of Sippar. Not save them, not carry them onto the boat, bury them in the ground at a named, real location. That line does not exist in the Nippur fragment. It does not exist in the fragment. It is absent from the version preserved at Ashurbanipal's library, the one institution in the ancient world built specifically to collect everything worth keeping. If burying the records before the flood was part of the original story, the keepers of the greatest archive in Mesopotamia either never heard it or chose not to include it. Why would the detail about saving the writing be the one detail that goes missing? To mainstream scholars, this is just literary accretion. Stories grow in the retelling, especially across centuries and across cultures. And Berossos was writing for Greek readers who may have wanted a more dramatic ending. That is the official reading, and it may still be correct. But it does not explain why the missing detail is specifically about hidden information, not the flood, not the animals, not the boat, the records, what was written down and where it was put so that it would survive the destruction of everything else. If the controversial reading is even partly accurate, the wall and the buried writings are not two separate flourishes. They are the same idea told twice in two different centuries by two different traditions that should not have agreed with each other by accident. One scene shows a god speaking through a barrier, so the message passes without the source being named. The other shows a man ordered to bury the only record before the disaster arrives. Concealment and preservation. Over and over, the same shape keeps appearing around the same myth. On its own, that could be coincidence. But the same pattern appears again. Somewhere it has no obvious reason to. In 2014, a tablet roughly the size of a phone, sitting quietly in a private collection, was finally translated in full by Irving Finkel, a cuneiform specialist at the British Museum. It has become known as the Ark Tablet. Unlike the literary, almost theatrical language of the Eridu Genesis, this fragment reads like an instruction manual. Precise measurements, specific materials, rope thickness, wall height, floor area. It tells a builder exactly how to construct a vessel to survive a flood. And the boat it describes is not the pointed ship later traditions imagine. It is round, a massive coracle with a base the size of a small stadium and walls 20 feet high. To archaeologists, this is still myth, a different scribal tradition recording the same flood story with different cultural details, the way oral traditions often diverge depending on region and era. The museum label calls it religious literature with practical flourishes. That is the official reading, and it accounts for most of what is on the tablet. But it does not fully explain the tone. If this was only mythology, then it was strangely technical mythology. The wall passage in the Eridu Genesis reads like concealment. The Ark tablet reads like a manual. Different objects, different excavation histories, different translators decades apart, and yet both circle the same unresolved tension. A story about gods that keep slipping into the language of instructions. Alternative researchers point to this contrast and ask an uncomfortable question. What if the flood narrative was never one story, but two layers pressed together? A surface layer of gods, oaths, and punishment, and underneath it, something closer to a transmitted set of survival instructions, passed along in a form simple enough to copy by hand for thousands of years. Mainstream scholars reject this reading outright. To them, a coracle was simply the boat technology the region's builders already knew, and the precision in the Ark tablet reflects ordinary Bronze Age craftsmanship, not hidden engineering. That may be the correct explanation. It usually is the simpler one, but it still leaves the same open question sitting in the room. Why does precision keep showing up exactly where the story claims something is being deliberately preserved? Here is where the mystery stops being about one tablet. The British Museum currently holds something close to 100,000 cuneiform tablets that have never been published or fully translated, not hidden, not classified, simply unprocessed, sitting in storage, waiting for specialists who have more material than time. The official reason is staffing and funding, the same reason most museum backlogs exist anywhere in the world. No one had to hide anything. They only had to be understaffed for 100 years. But cite with that number for a moment. 100,000 tablets, untranslated. Some are receipts and tax records, the unglamorous bulk of any ancient bureaucracy. Some are letters. And somewhere in that backlog, statistically, there are almost certainly more fragments connected to the flood tradition. The same way the 2018 fragment surfaced out of nowhere and rewrote part of the story again. How many other Ark tablets are sitting in a drawer that has not been opened in a generation? The institutional resistance here is not dramatic. There is no locked vault, no sealed file, no official denial. It is something quieter. A scan that was never added to the public database. A fragment separated from its matching pieces during a 19th century excavation, the two halves ending up in different countries, in different collections, cataloged under different numbers, never reunited. A translation published decades ago that smooths over an ambiguous line instead of flagging it, because flagging it invites debate. The original translator did not have time for. The official reason is always preservation, funding, or caution. The tablet was fragile. The fragment was incomplete. The reading was uncertain, so the safer interpretation was chosen. None of that requires a conspiracy. It only requires the ordinary friction of underfunded archives moving slower than the questions they contain. But the effect is the same either way. The most specific, most unsettling lines are exactly the ones that tend to get softened or left for later or filed without comment. If the pattern holds, and that is a significant if, then the implication widens past one tablet, past one flood story, into a much larger question about what the surviving record of Sumer is actually built from. The accepted timeline says the Sumerians were the first literate civilization, building cities, tracking the seasons, recording kings, watching the sky with nothing but their own eyes. Remarkable for their era, but still bound by the limits of their era. They should not have been able to describe certain things with the kind of specificity these fragments occasionally show. A named location, a precise measurement, a barrier built specifically to pass a message without revealing its source. If the controversial reading is even partly accurate, the flood story is not simply a myth about angry gods and a forgiving one. It may be a distorted memory of an actual transmission event. Information moving from one source to another, under restriction, disguised as religious narrative because that was the only format capable of surviving thousands of years of copying, war, fire, and loss. To alternative researchers, the gods in these stories start to look less like supernatural beings and more like something else entirely. Engineers, survivors, visitors, custodians of knowledge the rest of the population was never meant to fully access. Mainstream scholars firmly reject this. To them, Enki and Enlil are deities, full stop, products of a belief system that explain natural disasters through divine personality, the same way storm gods exist across dozens of unrelated cultures. That remains the dominant, responsible academic position, and it should not be dismissed. But the wall stays in the story. The buried writings stay in the story, even if only in the later version. The boat specifications stay precise. And the question is not whether any of this proves a hidden history. The question is why the pattern keeps appearing in independent fragments, recovered a century award, translated by different scholars who had no reason to coordinate a shared theory. The tablet does not answer that question. It was never going to. The upper third is gone. Whatever came before the wall, whatever instructions or warnings or names might have filled that missing space, broke off sometime in the last 4,000 years and was never recovered. Not destroyed deliberately, not hidden by gods, simply lost the way most of the ancient world is lost, in fragments, in fire, in the slow erosion of clay left in the ground too long. What is left now sits behind glass, lower third intact, upper section represented by nothing but empty space on the display card. A complete sentence with no beginning. Modern tools have started to close some of these gaps. AI-assisted transcription is now being used to compare damaged signs across thousands of tablets at once, flagging patterns no individual translator would catch by hand. Ongoing digitization projects are slowly working through that backlog of unpublished material, fragment by fragment, in archives that for the first time have the means to actually keep pace with what they hold. If there is a matching upper fragment somewhere in that 100,000, it is more likely to surface now than at any point in the last century. That should be reassuring. In some ways it is, but it also means the ending of this story has not been written yet. Somewhere in an archive, possibly already scanned and simply not yet flagged, there may be a fragment that completes the line the wall was built to protect. Or there may not be. The official explanation remains entirely plausible. A myth, reshaped over centuries, damaged the way all old things are damaged, nothing more sinister than time and clay. The alternative explanation remains unproven and likely unprovable with what currently exists. But it is hard to fully dismiss because the same shape keeps surfacing across sources that never should have agreed. A wall built to hide a source, a command to bury what was written, a boat described with the precision of an instruction, not a poem. Maybe it was only myth, but myth does not usually keep circling back to the same specific act: concealment, preservation, a message passed carefully from one side to the other so the source is never named. The tablet does not explain itself. It never did. It simply states that a warning happened, that a wall was involved, that something was meant to survive what came next. It does not say what was said. It does not say who was truly speaking. The upper portion is gone, the way the beginning of most ancient stories is gone, and what survives is only the part written closest to the ending. If the Sumerians invented this detail, they invented something strangely specific to invent. And if they did not invent it, then someone or something gave them a reason to write it down and to make sure, however it could, that the act of hiding it would never be forgotten. The wall is gone now. Whatever stood on the other side of it is gone too. And the tablet that survives only tells you that the warning happened. It does not tell you what it said.